Hello again, and welcome to part 2 of this fabric covered hardback refillable cover tutorial. I'm going to get these buttons sewn on to the cover, and I don't record that part. It's boring. It's sewing buttons, not very exciting. So once I get those buttons sewed on, I will be back with attaching this cover piece to the actual cover. Okie dokie, so you are going to want to grab your cover piece and place it on the cover with everything still clipped in place like we did in the last video. And using a ballpoint pen, you want to mark the corners of the base fabric there. So I'm doing one on each of these corners here. After all your corners are marked out, you want to remove all those clips, and then I'm going to apply just a small amount of glue on the cardstock on the back of that cover piece there. And this is just meant to keep this thing nice and straight while we pass this through the sewing machine. After the cover piece is on in a position that you like, go ahead and take out the chipboard and unfold the corners of this, and then we are going to slip this baby through the sewing machine. At the start of your stitch, remember to do that back and forth stitching with the sewing machine, and then again when you come back to where you started stitching to finish off the stitch, do that back and forth again. Also, when you're sewing this cover piece on, try and get right up next to the edge of that cardstock base. You really don't want it to be visible at all or lift up in any way, so get as close to the edge as you possibly can. Here I'm just doing some prep work for the inside of the cover, and this is going to be the lining for the inside of the spine. Using some cardstock, I am going to cut a piece that is the same height as the cover, but it's going to be wider than the spine, and this is because I'm going to want some overlap on the front and the back covers, just a little bit, but definitely make sure that it is indeed wider. I'm also going to be grabbing some fabric to line over the top of this, and I'm sorry if this is not making any sense right now. You'll see later in the video how I'm going to be using these two pieces. I am going to be covering the spine of this on the outside with this dark little like calico floral that I have. You don't have to choose a different fabric to go on the spine if you don't want to, but for mine, I'm making sure that the fabric that I'm using to cover the outside of the spine is wider than the spine itself, because it's going to be overlapping the front and the back a little bit. So now I'm just prepping to pass this through the sewing machine. You can see that I'm overlapping a little bit of my cover piece with this fabric for the spine. And I'm just going to hold these things in place with my fingers. I'm going to go slowly to make sure that the spine fabric is showing up nice and straight on the cover. I think it would look funky if it was a little bit crooked, unless you're doing a crooked on purpose. So just stitch this part together carefully, make sure everything is nice and straight. Also, something I did not mention before is this spine fabric here that I'm stitching on right now is taller than the cover piece. I did that on purpose. I want it to be able to fold over and around the chipboard base cover that we made. So again, personal preference, you don't have to make it like this. You could do it exactly the same height as the cover piece if you want to. Just worth noting in my video here because that's what you're going to be seeing. Okay, and now it is time to put everything together. So I'm going to be using some glue here on the cover, and you don't want to use a quick drying glue because, as you can see in my video here, I need to make a few adjustments after I put the glue down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the glue down, and then I'm basically going to be folding the sides over and closing up the journal and checking out how everything is lining up. And the first couple of times I try this out, I'm not happy with the way things are lined up, so I am able to adjust as I need to. So just don't use a quick drying glue because if you make small mistakes, you're going to want to be able to quickly go back and fix them. After I am happy with the position of the cover piece on the outside of this chipboard, I'm going to go ahead and start to, well, first I'm going to smooth everything out, make sure it's nice and secure on there. And then I'm going to flip the thing back over, and we are going to start to glue these edges down. I'm going to start with a squiggle of glue on each of these two sides here, and then I'm going to fold this over the edge of the chipboard, and this is where you're going to want some bulldog clips or clothespins to clip everything in place while it is drying. All my sides are glued down now and everything is clipped in place so it can dry. I'm just going to fold this up and set it aside, and then I'm going to continue working on the inside with the lining for the inside of the spine. So grabbing that cardstock and lining fabric, you could see that the fabric is a little bit wider than the cardstock. And I'm gonna sew this on with the cardstock facing up to make sure that it is staying within the boundaries of that fabric. Leaving the clips in place to let the glue set a little bit longer, we're going to start lining the front and back covers with our paper. And I'm doing mine in 2 layers. You can choose to do it in 1 if you have a thicker paper, or if you just prefer to do it this way. But I'm leaving about maybe 1 or 2 to 3 centimeters, I guess, of an edge, and I'm just marking with my fingernail where I want the paper lining to end on the front and back cover. And then I'm going to run this through the paper cutter and just start lining up the inside of the cover with it, using glue, I should say. It is also worth noting that I want this inside spine piece to overlap the paper that will be lining the inside of the front and back cover. So there's going to be an overlap there, and the spine piece is going to go over the top of the paper lining. I'm adhering this cardstock with some glue using a pretty decent spread. I'm going to lay that down on top of the inside of the cover, and then I'm going to prep another piece of paper that's going to go on top of this one for decorative purposes. Another reason using double layers is a good idea is because it's going to sort of disguise any sort of bumps and creases and stuff that the fabric will make underneath the lining papers. I laid that spine piece down on top just to test and make sure that the overlap is good. If you find that yours is too short, you can go ahead now and put another one together, making sure that it's a little bit wider. Now I'm cutting this avocado dyed paper down to make sure that it's the same width and height as those original cardstock pieces that I put onto the cover. So my two top papers ended up a teensy bit short, so rather than have a stark white edge, I am just going through and distressing the tops and bottoms of these cardstock pieces so that it's not so obvious and funky. Here I am running the outer edges of this whole entire thing through the sewing machine to keep everything in place. You are going to want to work very slowly on this part. It is kind of rough on your sewing machine. You might want to make sure you have a fresh needle in place and just go super slow. Be careful not to break your needle. And I am just doing the outer edges, but if you want to, you can go all the way around. Next, I'm going to add this lining, and I will be doing this with glue to start, and then after the glue is kind of set a little bit, I'm going to run this entire thing through the sewing machine, again working very, very slowly. Be very careful. In the past, not working with chipboard but with other like materials, I have broken needles and kind of been hit with the shards. So just be super careful, please. Nobody sue me if you get injured. This is my disclaimer. You need to be careful. Just go extremely, extremely slowly. On the front of my cover, I do have this piece of lace that I don't want to get stitched down. I would like it to be sort of like free. So just make sure anything that you don't want stitched down is moved out of the way. And we're gonna run this thing through the sewing machine. So now for punching the holes and setting the eyelets, I'm going to be using my Crop-A-Dile. I'm going to grab some eyelets, and you're going to want a pencil or something to mark out the points where you want your holes to be. For my holes, I am just eyeballing it. I'm going to fold up the spine so that I get a good idea of where the actual chipboard for the spine is. I want it to be as even as possible. I'm just kind of smoothing out the cardstock underneath the fabric a little bit, because as I folded it, it kind of wrinkled up a little bit. But go ahead, you can measure if you want to, and mark out the points where you want your eyelets to be. You do want to make sure that they are about the height of the insert that you want to use. So if you want to use an insert and lay it on the inside of the spine to get a good idea of where, sorry, there's a truck driving by. If you want to lay an insert down and use that as a point of reference for your measuring, go ahead and do that. Next, carefully line up your Crop-A-Dile and punch out those holes, and then you are going to set the eyelets. If you don't have a Crop-A-Dile, I think there's probably ways that you can work around this. Like maybe if you just used a regular hole punch, I think that would be fine. Another option is you don't even have to punch out the holes on this. You can basically just wrap your elastic or twine or sari ribbon, whatever you have, around the edge and tie them in place, and use that as an alternative to having the elastic go straight through the spine. You know, there's ways to work around things. Be creative, do some experimenting, and yeah, I think that just tying something around the outside of the spine to hold inserts in would work perfectly fine. So whatever you're going to be using to secure the inserts to the cover, you're going to want more than double the length of the cover. I'm going to be using elastic, so I'm just measuring double and then a bit more. You're going to feed it through the eyelets through the inside of the cover and then go directly across to the other side, and then on the inside you're going to pull it down, and then again feeding through the inside. You're going to repeat the process on the bottom. If you are using elastic, you want it tight but not like too much tension, just tight enough to make sure that the inserts are nice and secure. If you're using something else, just insert your journals inside the cover first and open to the center, and then tie the knot once your inserts are in place, and make sure that it's not too snug. The final step on these covers is punching another hole in the back cover to create a closure. Sorry. So this is how we're going to create our closure. And again, if you're not using an eyelet or punching holes, you can just leave the cover free from a closure, or you could just wrap something around and tie a bow on the front. And that's it basically for this tutorial. I hope you guys enjoy it. I would love to see if you guys decide to make some of these. If you post on Instagram, please tag me, or feel free to post here in groups. And yeah, have fun making and have a happy rest of your weekend, and I'll be back soon.